morning and welcome back to the Now Morning Show, where we've just spoken about some reading for kids, and we will continue the conversation around kids, this time paying attention to the increasing violence that is occurring against children, a real cause for concern. To have this discussion this morning, I am joined by Vandana Siew Sankar-Ali, the assessment manager and psychologist at the Children's Authority, via Zoom. Good morning, Vandana.
Good morning, and good morning to Trinidad and Tobago and all viewers.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning, since this is, as we said, a cause for concern that we really truly need to explore. So let's jump right into the conversation. Now, with several recent incidents in which children have become the victims of violent crime, we want to start by talking about the impact of such violence on not just the children who have survived these instances, but also the families involved as well. What have you seen from your perspective as a psychologist and, of course, assessment manager therein?
Okay, Anka, the consequences and the impact of this kind of violence are very dire. And so if we start by just talking about the children and the families, we're talking about trauma. And that exposure to that level of violence creates traumatic stress. And so we tend to see, children and families reliving that experience every day. They may be having nightmares. They may be very fearful, hyper vigilant as well as, they may be afraid that an incident like this will recur. And so that really sets the trajectory for mental health challenges such as anxiety and depression. And when we talk about children as well, that sometimes can manifest in different ways. So with very young children, you may see that they suddenly start to feel, they may complain of feeling ill, or they may not want to go to school because they're afraid of leaving home. They think something might happen to their parents at home or their siblings at home. And with older children and even adults, you might find that they may rely on coping mechanisms which may not be very healthy. So sometimes you may see persons relying on substance use or associating with the wrong kinds of company, just as a method of coping. And so this is really, really very significant. And unless intervention, trauma-focused intervention, is not provided at the earliest opportunity, we can really see some very dire consequences coming down the road.
Right. Now, you've identified trauma-focused therapy and those sorts of things as being almost remedial. What are we looking for in terms of signs in those persons or those children when they're younger? You did mention that reluctance to go to school, that anxiety, but let's talk about behaviors that perhaps we can see not necessarily as a family member, but as a member of the community, as a neighbor, as an aunt or an uncle. What can we look for in younger persons who may be showing some need for some sort of support as a result of that traumatic experience?
Okay, so with younger children in particular, apart from the physical complaints, they may actually stop being as playful or as expressive as they might be. They may show signs of being withdrawn. They may start to want to stay inside because they're afraid that things might happen to them on the outside. And we've seen incidents recently where children have been playing in their yard or in the street, and crime has hit them directly. So you might find some of those types of signs. You might see children having problems sleeping, they're afraid of the dark, they're afraid of all sorts of things they were not afraid of. You may also see fall in academic performance as well. So that's something that persons in the school environment should also pay attention to. Where you start to see changes, any change in your child's behavior from their normal baseline is a reason to be concerned, and particularly if they've been through a traumatic experience.
Now, traumatic experiences are relative. I mean, what might traumatize one person might not another. And so when we talk about remedial processes or possibilities, what can we look at? Therapy, activities? Tell us what we can actually do, because it is happening. So what do we do next?
Yes, so early intervention, as I mentioned, is really key. And so, first of all, before we get into any kind of formal intervention, we need to first allow children the space to return to some sense of normalcy and safety. And first and foremost, give children the opportunity to express themselves and how they feel. Sometimes as adults, hearing children relate difficult things is difficult for us to process because we are also going through our own trauma. But it's very important to give children the opportunity to speak and say how they feel, to talk about what they saw, what they heard, what they may have witnessed, so that they can get that fair process, right? And verbalize it. So it's not just this thing inside of them, but they can actually, verbalize it and make it external to them. And then creating that safe space as far as possible in terms of their own environment. Safety is the foundation of a child's self-esteem. And so if their environment and their support circle is not a safe one, then it really creates problems in terms of how they interact with the outside world. So as far as possible, family members or other persons who can come together and kind of recreate that safe environment for the child, sometimes even moving the child out of the environment that the traumatic experience happened in temporarily so that they can regain that sense of composure and safety is important.
Right.
And then when we get into interventions, we're talking about trauma-focused interventions, both for children and for families. And, within Trinidad and Tobago, we have a series of options. So there are incidents like recent ones that we've had. We have the Victim and Witness Support Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that intervenes and provides the type of psychosocial support and counseling required in an incidents like this and violent crimes. And then we also have the National Family Services Division of the Ministry of Social Development that they can provide counseling as well. And then we have children as part of the school system accessing services through the Student Support Services Division. And of course, the Children's Authority can support our partners where necessary. But that is really important to avert further damage and bring forth that healing and rehabilitation for both children and families.
Beautiful. I particularly appreciate that you made sure to include the family as a unit as well, because we often think of the individual themselves and the support that they need is secondary. Beautiful stuff there, Vandana. I do have to touch, though, considering specifically the instances of young children drowning, or more recently, the burn victim who succumbed to injuries more recently. Any particular perspective that you want to share on this, perhaps with not just safety tips, but the aftercare for the family, the community, and the likes?
Yes, so first and foremost, we want to, express our deepest condolences to all the families that have recently lost children. This is an immeasurable loss. And we also want to say that, of course, we reinforce all that we've been saying about ensuring that children are well supervised and that persons who you may leave your children with are persons that you can trust. Of course, when these things happen, there is no intervention that can replace your child, but of course it can give you the healing, the ability to process grief and loss and to move forward with the knowledge of what has happened, but to help you function in society. So we really encourage these families to access these services to help process this very, very, very serious trauma.
And on that note, I say thank you very much, Vandana, for joining us this morning, giving us some very much needed insight and reminding us of the support that is available to us as parents, as a community, and of course, as a nation. Vandana Siew Sankar-Ali, the assessment manager and psychologist at the Children's Authority, joining us this morning via Zoom. Thank you again very much. And of course, that is how we're going to take a quick break and come back with more here on the Now Morning Show. You don't want to miss it. Stick around, guys.